June 22nd, 2022. I'm watching Eyewitness News. It's the local whatever. And something just didn't sit right with me because there's this golf thing, which I thought golf was, again, I'm trying to decipher the crypt of the kids that are well fed and taken care of while I'm limping around New York trying to figure out what happened to the American colonies in the US. There's some stuff going on that nobody in my area talks about, being my mother and father, since we've been left out of the conversation. There's this golfer that comes on. He's in some PGA, which I get, that's golf. It says LIV golf. And then he's behind a screen that says US Open. And I'm like, now is he? And he talks about, don't put a black cloud over my head, man. I'm like, wait a minute. I mean, I came over, my grandparents came over in the Great Migration. But some civil war erupted, I'm just finding out, in some other continent. We had some unexpected visitors, which are now here and think that this is the high life. I'm getting papers from the local school, but the United States flag was taken down. I can't get any answers on that, and it flies everywhere else. Then I got a map of the 13 colonies. It says the 13 colonies, the American 13 colonies. Then I got a map of the United States with only numbers. That's interesting. Then he came home with Civil War papers. I'm like, again, preparing my son for his future on very little to go off of. And I'm watching the teleprompter, in case there's news from, afar, what else is going on. And then there's some guy who swings a club and hits a ball and then walks really far to go find it for a living. Now, I don't think he needed to go to school for that. So this gets confusing on, now, is my son going to qualify for the same level of salary that this man is living off of in the same world? I'm just curious. Because right now it seems to be really unfair. There seems to be some really serious problems. And I see some people eating and drinking and enjoying themselves really well. And there's some serious work to do. Just wondering who the gods look favorably upon. The mother who's been robbed of everything, concubined the wrong way, left in the field by herself, and is now struggling midlife crisis, looking at her son's future, and before she dies, because her health is withering away, with no money, no opportunity, and no chance at even love. I mean, that's just out the window at this point, because let's set priorities. And here's what I hear on the news.
ESPN reporting the PGA Tour will soon introduce a revamped schedule and increased purses worth at least $20 million in several existing events.
$20 million in purse for a guy who swings a club and runs after a ball. Wow. On a really nicely watered and green whatever. I thought that the children were allowed to do such things as a reward for service. So I'm just curious, has the world changed so horrifically in this modern mess of revolting results? Because I know I also saw President Biden come out, since I think they say that he's on the Saudi something or other in this US Open. Don't know what's going on with the Saudis, although I've heard something to do with oil. And then there's this whole thing with federal gas tax that they're waiving. I heard the local governors in the 13 colonies, heard one, saying that that'll wreck the infrastructure, is I guess what he's been told. And I'm like, but the gasoline, when the gasoline gets delivered and goes into the ground in New York, there are private companies. They have the umbrella of like Exxon or umbrella of British Petroleum and a handle that delivers them something. And then there's a private recipient who then does something with the gas company of like the local area and some local ordinance, which I don't know how that works. So I'm a little confused. If one guy said, he's like, I don't understand. He's like, a year or two ago, it was $2.50 a gallon. Today it's like 5 something. Even if like President Biden lowers it by 18 cents, why did it double? Where's that money going? I sure hope it's not to keep the grass green in somebody else's backyard with water being as scarce as it is in the desert. And $20 million in purses for what? What service does one get for that? And what's funding that purse?
More events could be added as well, with purses in the $25 million range. This, of course, in response to the Live Golf Series, which stole yet another marquee player today from the tour. ESPN saying 4-time major champ Brooks Koepka, the latest player to defect to the Saudi-funded league, which has been the...
It looks like he's wearing nice clothing, and it doesn't look like somebody's hitting him with genetic disorders and disease. I'm just curious why the gods favored him so much. I mean, like, I'm Rh negative. I don't know, I can't tell if he's Rh positive or negative. I'm just curious when there's a lot of work to do for God's helpers. Why on earth am I being punished and he's living in such frivolous opulence?
Center of controversy in the golf world. Funny thing is, when Brooks was asked about Live just last week,
and at this point, it's more, why is he blessed with so much opportunity and I've been starved completely?
it seemed like he wanted nothing to do with it.
Is there a figure at which you would swap tours? Does that exist? Is it as simple as that?
I haven't given it that much. I mean, I haven't given it that much thought.
Really?
I don't understand. I'm trying to focus on the U.S. Open, man. Like, I legitimately don't get it. I'm tired of the conversations. I'm tired of...
I thought the U.S. Open was tennis. How did the U.S. Open become golf? I've only heard U.S. Open for tennis. Again, like, things don't really get to my vicinity, it would appear, being held in the position that I am in New York and in the North America. But again, if it's a U.S. related issue, I'm pretty sure as far as continental, the United States has some obligation to America, but I see the us in U.S. in front of some word named open. So, I don't know, is that a branding issue? Who handles that at, like, God level? And he's tired of arguments.
U.S. Open, man. Like, I legitimately don't get it. I'm tired of the conversations. I'm tired of all this stuff. Y'all, like I said, y'all are throwing a black cloud on the U.S. Open.
And finally, if it feels like...
No idea what a black cloud means to him. But this is what I do know. Eyewitness News at 5. on this date, on June 22nd, 2022.
All right, Michelle, thank you for that. The cost of gas on President Biden's to-do list today. Mr. Biden now proposing a suspension of the federal gas tax for 3 months of the summer driving season. It's only 18 cents a gallon, the tax is, and there are real doubts if Congress will actually pass the proposal. But the president also asking gas stations for help.
First, my message is simple. To the companies running gas stations and setting those prices at the pump, this is a time of war, global peril. Ukraine. These are not normal times.
The website Gas Buddy estimates the suspension of this federal tax would save drivers $70 million a day. That's the total. For the average driver, up
70 million, oh my god, it sounds like you could play a lot of rounds of golf. But when you speak to the actual people, there's like some school nightmare or mess going on, some real disconnect between like the Uber spoon-fed and the rest fighting over dollars and cents, which actually do matter to some people. Now, Eyewitness News at 6 p.m. Same night. They had a little different angle. They listened directly to one of the persons in his car as his car was being filled, and then one of the governors in the Northeast spoke, and then it looks like, for lack of a better term, it looks like a suit. I don't know if he's a lawyer. Again, if they don't put their titles up, I really don't know how they fit into this gigantic puzzle.
Were we at $2.50 2 years ago? Now we're at $5, over $5. It's just not acceptable.
Gas prices are putting a strain on the economy as inflation soars, but the head of the Utility and Transportation Contractors Association calls the gas tax holiday a gimmick that should be rejected.
We may not even see a real relief. At the same time, while you're doing that, you're hurting the infrastructure funding for our nation.
Right, so he says infrastructure funding. They used fancy terms and gimmicky things like tax holiday, gas holiday. Again, it's, I don't even want to say general public's understanding, because it feels like, how many generals are there that have been talking to the public where they've got this one jambalaya story and they're not even using the right words in the right order to make sense for themselves, which only upsets them, and then it renders them in defense of what they need to tell the story all wrong.
The president is calling on the states to temporarily suspend their sales tax on gas while praising places like New York for reducing the gas tax. But in New Jersey, that proposal...
Because in the Northeast at the moment, because of how many, we'll call it refugees, like they were refused access at some point to get some word that looks like, the word refuse with 2 E's looks like refugee at this point, and they lost the S. Don't know why. But on that guy's, Guise, under that guise, there's now multi-nations fighting, multilingual fighting. Some of the same genetics come from different nations but look the same, don't sound the same, don't come from the same civil war elsewhere. And now it's an even bigger nightmare, because where did border security and patrol go on keeping the insides in and the outsides out when there's this now fight for what belongs, what doesn't? And then they're raising the gas to try to feed whatever's here because they realized we're over capacity.
is not on the table at least.
But yet the guy that swings the club gets a $20 million purse. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, I can't even get paid like something? I mean, to like follow along? I mean, Isn't there like one useful law enforcement officer that could use my help? I mean, anybody?
Please, not now.
You could do it, but here's the problem. It's constitutionally tied to infrastructure projects, which you'd have to stop. And then when you restarted them, it would cost all of us, including taxpayers, more money.
Consumers are looking for any relief from high prices, and a 90-day suspension of the national gas tax would be welcome.
Anytime you can put money back in our pockets, I'm all for it.
The federal gas tax holiday proposed by the president now has to be approved by Congress, and there is no guarantee that that is going to happen. In Union, New Jersey, Anthony Johnson, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
And there's the other nation speaking that's inside of the American colonies at the moment. So when they talk about Congress, which Congress? Is it, because I've seen, like, it looks like the Congo is now in Congress in New York, and I don't know where they hold their sessions, but I don't know how these whatevers are going into whatever, and however they're funding a lot of stuff looks really frightening. And in New York, I have the added security concern of this operation called the UN. Lots of flags, none of which I have been able to study in any great detail, but yet they somehow function here and elsewhere. I don't know who's watching them, who's in charge of them, how they hired them, how they even got that approval. Is it working? What's involved? I mean, like, again, this gets really... And then I look at some of the other news programs that they put up in there. Wow, that's a lot of pride. And I'm like, of all different... But that, then they get, like, all caught up in that. So, again, it's, like, a really touchy situation in New York. And I got real specific stuff, but, like, no big... specific place to, like, ask. I mean, like, I don't understand how it got this entangled or whatever. I don't even know what to call it anymore, honestly. It's star 1978, star 8378, Nicole, Cattaruzza, it's Earth, Solar System, Milky Way, Universe, Galaxy is broken, and it's Bayside Station, Bayside, New York, 11361.